Okay, that's great. And if Vicky does come on, just let me know so we can tell her that she will be voting. Yeah. Okay, everyone, welcome and welcome to the January 16th, 2024 meeting of the Village of New Paltz Planning Board. Tonight we have some administrative business, 2 public hearings, and a couple of application reviews to get through. I'd like to start by looking at the minutes from our January 2nd meeting. Did everyone get a chance to look over those? Any changes or issues? I'd like to get a motion to approve the January 2nd minutes.
So moved. We may not have a quorum.
Oh, because were you at the January 2nd meeting? I don't believe you were.
I weren't. Let me check the.
Oh, maybe you were.
I think you were
in the
here.
audience.
Okay.
Sorry.
No. None of this is, I don't take any of this.
Okay.
If I did.
God, Lord knows. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in that case, I guess we can vote on this at the next meeting and approve those then. Moving on, our village board liaison is not here tonight. And neither is our town planning board or environmental policy board liaison. Next, we have public comment. Is anyone here to make a general public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to move on to our first public hearing. Could I get a motion to open the public hearing for 2 Taylor Street, please?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is anyone here tonight to make a public comment about PB 2319 to Taylor Street? No, no, nobody online raising their hands. Okay. In that case, I'd like to get a motion to close the public hearing for PB 2319 to Taylor Street.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Second, we have PB 22-10, 11 Water Street. Could I have a motion to open the public hearing for PB 22-10?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Would anyone like to make a comment on PB 22-10, 11 Water Street? Yes, please. Yes.
This is the microphone, Michael.
Right.
Thanks. If you don't mind, could you
Yes,
please
sure.
introduce yourself?
So I'm Michael Zeeler. I live in the village of New Paltz. I am currently a member of the Historic Preservation Commission, but I'm here on my own behalf, not representing them. So I just recently had a chance to look at the traffic study and the various comments back and forth between applicant and planning board consultants. And I just wanted to raise a couple of points, actually 4 points, 2 about parking and 2 about traffic. So in the December response from the applicant's consultant, Creighton Manning, they made some revisions related to parking. And one of the things they did to address some of the questions was to change the size of the vehicle that they were using as their standard vehicle. And they reduced that so that they're looking at a mid-sized sedan. And therefore noting that the various space constraints can be met by that vehicle. So I would just encourage the planning board to consider, if you grant a final approval, that you include some conditional language in there that there be signage by the applicant around those spaces so that you don't have oversized vehicles, of which there are plenty on the roads these days, using those spaces and creating additional problems. The second point is they've reduced the spaces again in order to deal with some of these space constraints from a total of 33 required spaces down to 30. So they are, as you know, below the requirement as per your designation of a hotel and restaurant. The traffic consultant makes an assumption that, quote, says majority, if not all, restaurant users, unquote, will be hotel guests. I don't know that the traffic consultant is in a position to make that call in their memo. So again, I would just ask that you consider in your final approval language either that you restrict the restaurant to hotel guests only, or somehow or another try to create some assurances. An alternative might be for the applicant to talk to the Water Street Market property owners as neighbors, and maybe there are certain times of day or certain days of the week at certain times where overflow traffic parking might be acceptable there. But I don't think that, as it's stated in their December memo, that that's a sufficient allowance. Two traffic errors, two traffic issues. There are what I would consider sort of erroneous assumptions about what the traffic consultant decided what roads people will use to come to the hotel. I know some people at your last public hearing discussed this as well. The traffic consultant simply looked at the cardinal directions and made an assumption that roughly a third each would use Pencil Hill and South Side, or use Mohonk, or use Water Street. I think anybody who's lived here for a while would know that almost nobody's going to use South Side and Pencil Hill. In fact, Google Maps doesn't even offer that as a route option if you're coming from the south. So related to this is that the traffic study did not at all look at the impact on the Water Street Main Street intersection, which I think was an error in having them do that. I don't expect they'll go back and do it. And it's not a ton of cars, but it doesn't take a lot of cars to start having backups either on Main Street or on Water Street. So one possible solution would be for the hotel to advertise directions on their website about how people should get here. They should also instruct their staff about where guests should go when they're leaving in order to take roads that will minimize impacts, which probably would end up being mostly Mohonk to bring people to the traffic light. And the final point related to the analysis is that they also didn't look at any issues around people who are unfamiliar coming to and from the hotel, crossing the rail trail crossing and past the Water Street Market entrance, which is, as we all know, in busy seasons can be somewhat hazardous. And so, again, just instructing their guests and their staff to be particularly mindful of traveling through that area so that can minimize any chance of any pedestrian or bicycle accidents. That's what I want to offer, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Sure.
Would anyone else like to make a comment on 11 Water Street? Anyone on Zoom here to make a comment? Okay. Seeing none, I guess I'd like to ask the board how they feel about adjourning the public comment or closing public comment for now. Doesn't seem like we are getting a lot more additional comments at this point, but
I have a question, but I'm assuming that that's not within this category.
Well, no, so we're gonna have the full like application review a little later, but yeah, I think I'm in favor of closing the public comment for now. Rich?
Yeah, I think it makes sense to just share that anyone who has additional comments could still submit them in writing and we'd still consider them. But that the official formal public hearing, I would also recommend that it's.
Yeah, I think that's good to note.
Can I say a couple things before we vote, because it's
Sure.
relevant to voting to close it? So it can come up again in the application review, but in case anyone's only paying attention to the public hearing, one is I think a lot of interest and benefit would come, is a lot of interest in and some benefit would come from having a updated rendering that really gives a appropriate visual perspective of the hotel from probably multiple approaches. So I just want to, and I just note that that's been a request in several of the public hearings. And I just want to make sure that's on record before we close the hearing, that that's something that absolutely we and the public needs to see. And we'll make sure to mention that to the applicant. And then the other thing is just to mention that there's been several instances where the public hearing comments have been have made the suggestion that none of the issues that are being raised are addressed. And I think that it's important in the context of the public hearing just to mention that they never are addressed in the moment that they're raised, but they're certainly logged by us and addressed over time. So just to say that, like, there's been quite a few elements of contribution to the public hearing, and those are all in consideration in our work.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't directly answer questions during the public hearing, but it's all taken into consideration when we're asking the applicant questions and doing the application review. Okay, given that, I'd like a motion to close the public hearing for PB 22-10, 11 Water Street.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi, oh, I'm sorry, it didn't come out loud enough, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, I'd like to move on to our first application review of the night, PB 2204, 184 Main Street. Welcome.
How you doing?
Did you all get a chance to review the resolution of approval? Yeah. Okay, and there's no questions or concerns there right now?
No.
Okay, I don't think we had any. In that case, I'd like to just go through it quickly with the board. And so there's some general conditions, like all of our resolutions, and then a few specific conditions as follows. Number one, the roof deck shall be operated in conformance with the narrative on sheet SK1, last revived 7/11/2023. In no case will the roof deck remain open for use after 11 p.m. After 11 p.m., there will be no lighting on the roof except for floor level security lighting. 2, the hotel shall be operated in conformance with the requirements of Village Code 212-41I. 3, the outdoor cafe shall be operated in conformance with the requirements of Village Code 212-41J. 4, all use of the property shall comply with the Village Noise Code, Chapter 143. 5, lighting shall conform to the details on sheet PB3, including dimming of parking lots to 50% between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. unless activated by motion sensors. 6, Parking will be provided by a combination of on-site and on-street parking. The proprietor of the building will ensure that adequate parking spaces are designated on-site for hotel guests. 7, no signs have been approved as part of this plan. All signs must comply with the village's sign regulations. Village Code 212-25 must receive approval from the building inspector or planning board as applicable. And number 8, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, applicant shall submit proof of all necessary approvals from the New York State Department of Transportation. With that, I'd like to get a motion to approve the resolution of approval.
You keep going.
Okay, we got a roll here. So moved.
And second,
Second,
and could we have a roll call vote, please, on?
Aye.
I,
Aye. And that's it. I think you're all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Hey, Sam. Good one, Eddie.
Next, we have DB 22-10, 11 Water Street. 11 Water Street.
Hey there.
So, can you tell us about the any submittals that's come in over the last 2 weeks?
Yes. We can start with the stairwell on the south side of the property, if you will. It's now on the plan here. In this section. This is the stairs that will lead up to the rail trail. And I know Rich was supposed to submit an easement to you. I'm not sure if he did that yet. But he's working on it, so he'll have it to you.
One question I have about that, is the intention for this to be part of the sidewalk system, like for the general public to use? Or, yeah.
Yeah.
So is the easement then for public access?
I guess it could
I'll
be,
talk to Rich about that.
you know, I don't know how you guys treat the sidewalk portion of it
Yeah.
per se, but yeah, you can talk to Rich about that. But, you know, as far as we're concerned, like we would, you know, give reciprocal easements to, I think it got,
To the hotel property, but it might be an easement to the village if it's gonna be part of the sidewalk, so.
so our stairwell is gonna lead up and end at our property line. And then from there, you know, somebody can walk onto rail trail property. But I think they'll if they don't actually reach the rail all the way to the rail trail. So I think we still have to discuss with the town board about this connection and how we're going to treat these tracks. But, you know, we would just wanted to get to this and just do it in one shot rather than take the time to do it twice.
Sure.
So if that helps. Any questions about that?
No.
Okay. So the other submission was in regard to parking and also a suggestion that was made to us about eliminating potentially the middle ingress egress to the property.
Yes.
And I'm gonna let Frank lead on that. Frank's our traffic engineer. If you don't mind, Frank.
Sure, Jesse, thank you. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Good, Good evening, everyone. Good to see you. So we prepared a December 29th submission package to address some follow-up comments from your consultant DTS Provident, as well as we've prepared some documentation regarding the idea of removing the central driveway. And we've been at this site plan for a while. I think we looked at probably upwards of 6 different iterations of the site plan relative to traffic and parking to try to really make it as good as we can. At this point, we don't see any way around eliminating the central driveway. It's vital to the circulation of this site, not just for guests of the facility or employees, but really for first responders, deliveries, and the like. So we did investigate a scenario where if that were closed and all access was to be achieved at the south, how that would affect or how that would work. And we kept coming back to the fact that, and I'll present some documentation on the screen, but one of the biggest issues with that whole concept of having everyone come in at the south end of the site and leave at the north end of the site is that the north driveway, which we've been proposing to be ingress only, has poor sight distance for egress movements because of the curve in Water Street and the change in elevation as you head towards the rail trail crossing. So if you were to have 100% of your exiting traffic there, that traffic would have substandard visibility from which to turn on to Water Street. When you couple that with entering at the south end, and I'll just share my screen if I may, just to illustrate something. Just give me 1 second here. So we have to keep in mind that if all access was coming in at the south end here, that would also have to work for delivery vehicles. And this turn is not really a tenable condition for delivery vehicles. And for the majority of traffic coming into this site to have to make a 180-degree turn, it's just not a good situation. And the flow is completely interrupted by that maneuver. This is not even to mention the emergency vehicle access, which we've worked quite extensively with first responders to get that vehicle into the site. And then lastly, the issue at the north end with being able to exit the site and have adequate sight distance. So that's the reason really why we keep coming back to the central driveway being vital. I know it's only it's 3 driveways. So, I think the gut reaction is, well, that's a lot of driveways, but the south driveway is exit only, the north driveway is entrance only, the middle driveway is full access. And the existing condition is essentially a free-for-all with no delineation of access. So there's a lot of improvement taking place with this plan. It is a challenging site in terms of its depth, which is one of the reasons why we need more than one access point to serve this site. So I hope that kind of provides a little bit of the background for why the access is what it is. One of the other factors was this turn from Mohawk, which is a very difficult turn to make. So that's why we have this central driveway, so that maneuver can be more easily made. But we still have the driveway on Water Street so that this northerly parking area can be accessed. So a lot of thought has been put into this relative to trying to accommodate all vehicles that are coming to this site, not just guests or employees. hope that provides a little bit of the background that you were looking for.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
I would like to also point out, this parking, that, I listened to some earlier comments and, some comments from some of the board members last week about the parking and about how we changed our car that we were using for for this idea of getting cars through the property. And, we've made these 2 spaces compact cars, and I think, I had requested that this be made a compact as well. So this will just be give us a little bit more, although it has 22 feet, we'll have a little bit more room even then.
Yeah, that makes sense. What were,
Snow removal, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, there.
Easily, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have a specific? Well, I'd be interested, there's, I've read the memo, so I've seen, we've seen both the comments that have gone back and forth about these issues of ingress and egress and the movement within a lot. And so, thank you, Carlito, for all the input you've given so far, but just interested in your reaction to the most recent memo and drawings about, the justification for the 3 means of ingress and egress and the way they lay out and how they work.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Carlito Holt with DTS Provident. Yeah, we reviewed the latest memo as well as the turning templates with the sedan sized vehicle. And that's for starters, that's something that is fairly accepted within the industry to use that more typical size vehicle, understanding that you may get some larger vehicles. I will also mention, our experience with the turning template analysis is it's extremely conservative. So, most vehicles can turn on a tighter steering angle than what the software allows for. But I think overall, I think when this application first came to our office to review, we had some serious concerns about the multiple access points, the way the flow was oriented between the multiple access points. But I think where we arrived today in this iteration of the plan is a much better overall plan. You have the one-way circulation essentially from the north of the property to the south of the property, so you avoid any internal conflicts with two-way traffic trying to come in the southern entrance and go north. Does that mean that you may have a vehicle that comes in the central access that doesn't find a parking space on the southern portion and has to circle back out to go into the northern entrance on occasion? But I think the volumes are low enough that that's not going to be something that's going to create a significant impact. Plus, I think one of the key aspects that you're now going to have is a sidewalk that's provided along the entire lot frontage, which I know we had some questions about how that connected with some certain spaces that were in the original plan. And I think now you have a much better pedestrian friendly plan. And I think in speaking with the applicant's traffic consultant as well, and getting a better understanding, based upon their iterations of analysis, I'm comfortable with this plan being able to operate. And as Frank mentioned, there's 3 access points, but kind of a rule of thumb, if you have one-way access points, you kind of combine them. So if you look at the one-way enter, one-way exit, that's one. So the central access would be your second access point, so to speak. And I think, as Frank alluded to, right now you have just a drop curve for the majority of the property frontage with no access control whatsoever. So I think that's a significant improvement upon the existing condition. So, overall, we feel much better about this plan, and I think we've arrived at quite frankly, what might be the best plan for this site and the intended use.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Carlito, thanks very much for that. And I just had one other request for you to comment about. And I know might not be in front of you immediately because it was earlier, but there was a traffic study done earlier that assessed the likely volume, the projected volume of traffic at certain times and days of the week, including peak times, the impact on the intersections of that additional volume in the build scenario that was proposed. And I'm interested, it's kind of a two-part question. One, I'm interested in, just, I think it was in a memo of yours some time back, but whether you're confident in the projections that are inherent in those traffic assumptions, because as we know, they all indicate that these intersections are A intersections today and will continue to be A performing intersections after. So I'm interested in your perspective on that. And then I'm interested in this additional question, which is if there might be an operating procedure imposed on the hotel, for example, to use a particular route, to recommend to their guests to use a particular route to get there. If we were to think about Main Street being a route to arrive, that intersection was not included in that traffic study. So one, I'm interested in your overall impressions on the traffic study and its validity, and secondly, that you can share because it's a bit important to the community. And then if you can share whether you think a look at that Main Street intersection and its impact would be important.
Sure. So I guess the first part of the question, I think, based upon some back and forth in our comments and responses, we've gotten comfortable with the projected numbers, which are based upon, ITE data for the two proposed uses. And I think in some respect it is conservative because the hotel use in many instances already accounts for having some sort of restaurant use in it, but they did the trip generation on top of that for the proposed restaurant use. Albeit they're not significant numbers, but then if the numbers changed, by like 10% or even 20%, you're not talking about a large variation in the estimated trips. They're looking at 6 weekday AM hour trips, 18 total PM hour, and 27 total Saturday. So we classify this as a minor traffic generator. As far as the analysis at the locations they analyzed, we're comfortable that that the level of service wouldn't change incrementally from the volumes that would be generated from the site. Now, if you redistributed the traffic to have a heavier volume out to Main Street, I think still in that instance, if you're looking at say the PM hour, which had 18 total trips, if you had all 18 trips going through that signalized intersection, you're not even adding one trip for every time the traffic signal cycles all the way through. So without actually seeing intersection analysis and level of service results, although I think we generally know how that operates, having seen that intersection analyzed in other traffic studies, is it going to show an incremental change in level of service or delay? Yes, but I think it would be minor, from the amount of total traffic that this site would be generating.
Okay. Other thing I did have a question related to the cafe use. Is there going to be any restrictions on drinking in that?
I think and we have a full narrative that we shared with all of what we've spoken about. So we can always refer back to that, but there will be, yes, there would be a waiting list for somebody that from general public to come in from the outside, because we only have a certain number of seats for that restaurant. So it'd basically be a first come, first serve. And what's that? Or reservation, right?
And can you remind me how many seats that is?
9,
Okay.
correct.
As I recall, it wouldn't be permitted by New York State law, and the liquor authority to have it restricted to hotel guests only if we
Correct.
were to choose to serve alcohol.
General public,
It has to be publicly accessible. But it has 9 seats and you have 26 rooms.
right?
So.
But actually, we do, which is correct, but then we also have a guest lounge that, or we call it the parlor, right? That's what we call it. And in that lounge is key fob access for guests, that they would have seats to be able to sit in that lounge. Otherwise, it would be left empty. Right.
The public is designated to one small section with the corresponding parking spaces, whereas the guests of the hotel will have a larger access.
But food and beverage service will happen in the lounge also?
Yes.
So it does open the potential for a 9-seat restaurant that might be at any given time accessed by outside.
Correct.
Were there other traffic concerns we need to?
There was snow removal, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, if I could just make sure, does the memo that was included in the response memo regarding the overlap of traffic consideration and how that would give us discretion to have that waiver of the 3 spots, is that explanation sufficient for us to
Yeah, I
consider?
think it just came in today, if
So-
I'm not mistaken.
So it's, yeah.
Yeah.
This
Well,
one.
it was briefly addressed in one of the memos that
Okay.
were from the traffic consultants from Creighton Manning.
Yes, it
just-
was in our December 29th memo. We provided, if you're looking at it, it's at the bottom of page 3 and at the top of page 4.
So it's still at our discretion as to whether, but I just want to make sure that the explanation is sufficient for us to make that final decision. We could all look at that if it came just late.
Right, so the idea was that how many spaces are we reducing by?
3.
3. And that's accounting for the overlap with the restaurant and the hotel.
Correct.
And there are other considerations in there, like, likely hotel capacity versus occupancy and the considerations of employees potentially residing and or parking at the adjacent property. But I don't know that we're allowed to consider those formally because the code doesn't necessarily provide the discretion for us to consider additional questions like that.
Right, the code specifically says we can consider the overlap. So, I mean, this looks to me like a reasonable explanation if the board, agrees with it. The only thing that we need to clarify is it ends by saying that we're banking the parking spaces, and we need to decide whether we're eliminating them because we don't think they're needed, or if we're banking them, meaning we're having a design where we pre-plan where those spaces would go so that. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
so-
we would need another plan that actually has those spaces drawn in and, that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sure. That makes perfect sense. I mean, we have that plan already, and we actually, this was the update to that plan.
I
So we can
remember,
change,
yeah.
we could just update that plan showing this parking space and bring these 2 parking spaces back.
And with those 2, would the turning motions and everything still work? I'm just saying that if we want to bank them, then we need to
Yeah.
actually have a plan so you can build it in the future. But if we
Sure.
don't think they're needed, we don't have to go through that exercise.
I mean,
Jesse,
go ahead.
if I may, I thought our approach to this was based on the data from Woodstock, based on ITE, that those spaces were not needed. The ITE data is pretty compelling that a hotel of this size would only require 25 parking spaces. and that is corroborated by the studies of the Woodstock site. So I think in the interest, we heard some concerns about on-site circulation, and I think in the interest of that, if we can, the data showing that we don't need that parking, then my position would be, Jesse, as long as you're okay with that, would be to not land bank it so that they can truly be used as green space and circulation.
I mean, I'm okay with that. I mean, I would say like this one in the hatched area, we could always bring back if it was gonna be a problem, but I don't foresee it being a problem.
Yeah, I'm fine if you want to, reserve that one, but I would be hesitant to land bank these because I think it would mean you would have to eliminate some of that green space or
Which is
potentially
Gonna
change.
be super more appealing than,
Yeah,
right, than two
Exactly.
parking spaces, right?
And it's not to say that if it doesn't work, you couldn't come back to the planning board for a revised site plan. It's just, whether we need to do that now.
Sure.
okay.
And is there any limitation in the code for us to have it be, have one spot at our discretion or in other words, one spot banked based on the existing plan and not the other two?
We're deciding.
I
that
think we should just
design-
maximize it in that, my recommendation would be to maximize it in that way, with one spot land banked. Thank you, Frank, for your, what you've shared, but we also have to, we're bound within what the code allows us to use as discretion, not necessarily even your science, which I appreciate, so.
Understood.
Thanks.
Right, so we can make that slight modification to the memo, the narrative. And yeah, do we want to talk about the snow removal? Do
Sure.
you have a?
Yes, so I reached out to a guy today on a recommendation, Bill Dietz, and had a conversation with him, without really knowing many other potential operators here for snow removal. They do remove snow. I did explain that we were having a discussion about during the winter months, we would have a lower occupancy, and historically we've shown lower occupancy. And as a result, there would be some open spaces. And in those open spaces, we could potentially store snow in the event of a major storm. And for the weekends where our occupancy is actually higher, we could then remove the snow via our Bill Dietz that does do snow removal.
Okay.
And I had written a narrative on that sheet online that I've shared with everybody, and we can, if for whatever reason you don't have access to it, I can give you access to it.
Good.
Plus, I believe that this area over here, now that we don't have those two parking spaces, is going to be a good spot for snow to be added.
You mean like on top
Stored.
of the
Yeah,
on top of the green
piled on
space?
top of here, and then maybe these two spaces over here, so it could just be plowed straight through.
Yeah. Okay. Does that seem reasonable to you, Rich?
It's not an area of knowledge or expertise of mine.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I do appreciate that you reached out to a vendor, and I don't know if this is something Carlito has, any standards around diagramming or documenting the process that they believe is possible.
My experience is it kind of happens organically. If the operator needs the spaces, they're gonna figure out a place to put the snow or haul it off site. Otherwise, they're not gonna be able to operate.
And we could have a condition that, because if they agree, if they decide that they're gonna leave it piled and occupy a certain number of spaces, and then if it creates a traffic or parking issue because there's not as many spaces as needing to be used, there could be conditions in the site plan that says, you know, something to the effect of, excuse me, in the resolution that says something to the effect of, you know, snow storage cannot reduce the number of parking spots needed for the operation of the hotel at any given time, so that if people are trying to park and they can't park because 8 spots are filled with snow, that would be a violation of the certificate of occupancy, essentially.
Right, yeah, I was gonna say, it becomes almost a code enforcement issue. You know, you're not, if you don't have 8 spaces available, you're not complying.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think if the site plan calls for the parking spaces and they're not available, that's gonna be a code enforcement.
Which we're never gonna let happen.
We can
Okay.
write it in, but I think
Yeah,
it's
I don't know if we
duplication.
need to add that to the, but yeah, mainly just wanted to make sure that it wasn't going to be blocking the sidewalks either, and wouldn't affect the pedestrian flow, because I think during winter is when fewer people are going to be walking on the rail trail, so having a clear sidewalk would be important.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we talk about the sewage and stormwater drainage? Is that?
Sure, I believe that our engineer had a conversation with, forgive me, I think he's on the call, right? Dennis, yeah, Dennis, and I think we worked out a solution for that. You know, I think it's an acceptable one as far as I know so far.
For stormwater, we're talking?
No,
about?
for sewer.
Okay.
For
Right,
wastewater, and then for stormwater, that's a little bit more in depth, meaning that a week ago, this past Saturday, our engineer and team came down to the site to watch the water, its pathway onto our site, and we've determined that there's a lot of water coming off of the hills and down into our site. So they're currently working on a plan that I'm hoping will be available to you to review at our next meeting, and also Dennis for his review. But I know they're working through it, and I know that they were there and they were able to see exactly what was going on
Okay.
after a storm. So if that,
Yeah,
Right.
that sounds good. Can you just tell us about the wastewater agreement, or what conclusion you came to?
not yet. We don't have an agreement necessarily, but I think it would be somewhat of a contribution to the of a larger project that's going on in town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and Dennis, could you just tell us your review of the water main changes and any issues regarding the wastewater on the site?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. With respect to the wastewater in the site, we had noted in our November memo that we were concerned about the overflow that happens on occasion, hopefully more rare occasions than in the past, in front of the property of the village system, when it becomes overloaded with extraneous flow from illicit connections, mostly into the system. So I had two concerns. One, that they designed their plumbing system so that would not backflow, that village system could not backflow into the building. And I know Mr. Menbach's team is addressing that. And then the other concern was the overflow impacting the property as far as wastewater overflowing across the property and creating an ugly situation for the property owners. So I think spoken to the mayor, and we're looking at some projects in the village, and not just looking at them, but he's authorized some preliminary design work for some additional projects that would free up some hydraulic capacity at the plant and during these peak flow events. And we're also looking at, in the 1990s, for 4 years, we monitored the flow coming off the campus into the village system, specifically at Mohonk and Southside. And the college then was compelled to do certain projects on their site to reduce extraneous flow, and we're gonna reinstitute that monitoring program just to see where it is now 30 years later, whether there needs to be more done there or not. But it's a common in an old village, old city. Kingston's got the same problem. Village of Catskill, Village of Saugerties. During extreme events, there were a lot of illicit connections made over the years on private property that have not all been corrected. The village has aggressively, in the last 10 or 15 years, been replacing its sanitary sewer system street by street every year with community development money, tightening up their system. But we also have, like I said, the college, and we have some portions of the town that connect. So it's a work in progress. And the best way to deal with this with developments is to try to get some contributions, some buy-in to help the village make more progress in separating their systems and tightening their systems. And I spoke to Barry Medenbach as well about making sure that overflow would be collected by any storm improvements that are being designed with the project, so that you didn't have it flowing across the property and up against in the parking lot. And I believe that's being done. I have not seen the additional details on the water main relocation, I should say. I will double check, but that's pretty much, that could be a condition anyway. That's pretty straightforward. They are showing the water main relocation, but we just needed some details on added to the site plan regarding disinfection notes, pressure testing notes, and wet taps, a few, not a lot. So hopefully those have been added or are being added for the final set.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Any specific questions? Or general questions?
Yeah, so stormwater still, I mean, we do have a site drainage plan now.
Yeah.
But like I said, he went back out to the site to watch the water track onto our property and how we're going to capture that from offsite locations, and then how we're going to redistribute it to daylight.
Yeah, I just didn't know if Dennis had any, I appreciate that,
well-
you went out with it during a storm, that was a great idea.
I don't think you have the full plan yet, so.
Not yet.
So
They're working on it.
maybe when that comes in next week, we can send it to Dennis. And you got his notes on the water main replacement, that those are gonna be added to the final.
Yes, Solomon, are you here with us?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Did you catch those notes from Dennis?
Yeah, I heard what Dennis said. Yeah. And I took those notes down. So we'll add those details to the plan. I just want to say the level of, or the amount of water that is coming down is it's gonna cause a real engineering, I don't want to say dilemma, but it's going to take more than a week to figure it all out and have a proper working engineering plan for that water, for the stormwater specifically. I don't know when it will be available. The person who's doing the design, when I ask a question, the answer is when it's available. I hate to say it. It's not my, I don't like to give unended answers, but that's what I'm getting. So as soon as it is available, we'll provide it.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Question of Emily, in terms of the potential for a contribution by the applicant to help alleviate the work that needs to happen to reduce the or eliminate preferably the sewage issue on the site and the adjacent properties. Are there, I guess I should just ask, are there any precedents or standards that would require a certain percent contribution by the applicant in a situation where, as I understand from Dennis, that it's pretty complicated as to what's causing this, but we wouldn't want to just agree to a number that's not sort of somehow some pro rata assessment of the contribution of the new property, or do we? And is that okay? And does that set any precedent for the future?
It's definitely something to consider, and I don't want to just answer it off the cuff. In fact,
Okay.
it might be something for us to discuss in attorney-client session. It needs, the law is that it needs to be roughly proportional. If the applicant wants to make us an offer, then we don't have, we don't have a problem there. But if we want to require something,
Right.
Yeah, we'd have to consider how to make that fair.
Justification.
Yeah.
of some sort. Okay.
Yeah, I would add that the wastewater flow from this project would not have a material impact on what's happening with this occasional overflow at this location. Because I know there was some discussion about flow equalization or storage on the site, and we didn't feel that would be an appropriate, that would be really beneficial, and it would put a burden on the operator. So we rather see, some progress and maybe a contribution to the, overall village sanitary upgrade, which is mostly hydraulic capacity related. So.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah.
Just wondering, as far as the stormwater issue, just to consider where we go from here. I'm wondering to what extent managing the stormwater might affect the design of the site. Because if it will, then we might need to wait for that before we move forward.
Good point. Yeah.
In other words, are the entrances going to change? Is there going to be a big storage basin somewhere, like that sort of thing?
If there were to be a retention tank, it would be under the parking lot. So no, I don't think that's going to change that as far as I am understanding of this, it's not going, and just speaking to our construction experts, it would go right under the parking lots.
If I may, I was also going to say, we're only talking about catch basins and piping. We're not talking about changing the site plan significantly, but it would be a part of the site plan to add that in it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree. It would not materially change the site plan. And just needs to be detailed on the site plan.
So in that case, do you think that we're at a point where we could refer this to the Ulster County Planning Board?
Yeah, and I think I was thinking specifically about starting the part two of the seeker if you're ready to do that. the next meeting.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
I don't know if it's the next meeting that we discuss this.
uh-huh. Yeah, I was hoping to do the EAF part 2 at the next meeting.
Can I make a
And-
suggestion? Something I mentioned earlier, and I said I would make sure we shared it with the applicants. I think part of the part 2 is gonna require us to consider the visual impact and the presence of the new construction in that location. And we certainly see it in the context of the site plan, but I was curious to see whether there's any renderings that are more current and more realistic to
Sure.
to the setting than anything we've seen till now.
Yes, there's not, we haven't changed the renderings to date, for a couple different reasons. One, we're still messing with, whether we were gonna have 2 entrances instead of 3, and didn't want to continue to engage our guy to get this done until we had like a plan that we can agree on. So now, if we have a plan that we can agree on, 100%, I'll get, by our next meeting, I'll have renderings that will show everybody what it looks like from a computer's building aspect.
And one thing is not necessarily rendering, but you can scroll through a few of the site plans and see that there's one that has the footprint of the existing building and then, but there's never, well, I haven't seen one, I should say, I haven't noticed one that has the imprint of the existing building versus the footprint of the new building. And that would be a visual benefit to the board to see.
Exactly, right there.
I don't know if it's in the most recent.
It's definitely in here. You
There's
can,
one
the
that has the
dotted
old-
line,
there's one that has the old building and the new building.
you see where the dotted line is?
Right.
That's the old building. This dotted line is the old building. This whole,
Yeah.
this goes all the way around, all the way
Okay.
around, all the way
I see it on
around,
this.
and all the way back to here. Yep. Which happens to be 12,000 square feet and change, I think. Maybe closer to 13. Is it?
Footprint is roughly half.
Right.
The current angles that we show you in the renderings that you've seen in the past. Are there other angles that you want us to create?
I had it open a second ago. I wouldn't say that they're necessarily, let me just look at one.
So I think it's important to try to get the elevation correct, where, coming from on Water Street, this is, I don't know, at least 20 feet above ground level over here. So having that perspective, I think, would be really helpful, and similar on Pencil Hill, you're actually looking down.
So wait, you're talking about basically where the rail trail kind of meets this sidewalk looking down? Because we had it from up here, didn't we?
One where it looks down on it, and the idea was that somebody was up at Water Street Market. at
Okay.
At the, yeah. And, but I didn't have any contours of that area, so we just sort of took a good guess at it.
Yeah.
Really I think that we have topo marked on some of the drawings, but really from our first floor to the top of the rail trail, in the end is only be 4 feet. So it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
Right now, it's a little bit more than that, but we have to build up our site.
Yeah.
And so, but if you have other locations, we just did it from.
Thank you. My recommendation is, it wasn't necessarily about the angles and locations from which the views are done, because I think they're right. I think it's the reality of the spaces and the way these roads and the background visuals present themselves. I don't even know if it's possible to almost like Google Earth them as opposed to making them beautiful, because I think folks would want to just get a sense of like, okay, that's Pencil Hill. Where does the property land, and what does it really look like when the interface?
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know how close we'll get with like that parking lot that's across the street and, you know, all that gravel stuff. I don't know how close we'll get to that, what's there now, but
Oh, yeah,
can-
yeah,
I mean,
you don't
he-
need to,
Yeah,
accurately
in a
render
picture.
that,
Right.
but getting certainly the shape of the roads, which is what I think Rich is saying, and some of the topography in there, just to get a sense of how the intersection will really
so
look.
we could probably to make the roads a little longer, like he just stopped them wherever. and
Yeah,
just to give you a better
was
sense
really,
of-
right, focused on
Yeah, we were focused on a site.
projects,
Yeah.
right?
Do we want to pull that back a little bit to see the sidewalk?
You know, people are very worried about sight lines in and out of it, so they can't really tell that from there, so pulling it back could be another thing. I think, you know, and when I say people, I'm thinking about ourselves as we think about the EAF part two, but also about the public. I think that, just having a real, I think it's to your advantage to have a realistic representation of what the hotel looks like on that property, because I think it's, less imposing, less site restricting, you know, more safe in many ways than what is there today. But when it's depicted as a sort of a wonderland of this place that doesn't look anything like the space today, then it feels unrealistic as to what people are wanting to envision. So just
Well, engage,
recommending realism, some of the same angles, maybe pulling it back a little bit, and not 100 of them, but a few that are current would be great.
Yeah. easy enough.
There's a lot of really great enhancements to the property that aren't even represented in this one, like the
Sure.
sidewalk.
That one's
This one's still
quite old
parking by the
at
road.
this point.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. Okay, well, I mean, at this point, I'm comfortable in referring the application to the Ulster County Planning Board. Okay. Does that sound good? All right, could I get a motion to refer PB 22-10 to the Ulster County Planning Board?
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And I think the next meeting, we can try to go through, you know, if you're able to do the renderings, before the meeting, then we can try to go through the EAF part two. Yeah, the stormwater plan won't take too long.
Hopefully not.
Well, we have the.
Yeah, okay, so maybe the 20th is more realistic.
Of February,
Yes.
okay. And with the Ulster County Planning Board, or is there somebody that I need to contact there? Oh, awesome. Thank you for that.
All right, that's all.
Great.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone, for your time and
You guys.
being out here on the night, out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
So finally, we have PB 2317 to Taylor Street. Hello again. So I don't think we have too much to go through tonight. There are no changes to the site plans or anything, okay? And we received your memo on the drainage. And yes, let me just put that up. Right. And Actually, Autumn, did you say that, did Blue have any comments on this project? Did he get a chance to look at the site plan? Okay. Yeah, I mean, given the infrastructure in place on Cooper Street and Taylor Street, I don't anticipate there would be a problem. Rich, did you have any
No,
questions
I
about
don't.
this? Okay.
Thank you.
So, case, were there any other things that we need to discuss? Yeah, I think I'm ready at this point to authorize our attorney to draft a resolution of approval. If the board agrees, I'd like to get a motion to authorize drafting a resolution of approval.
Thank you. So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I did, I.
Oh, okay. So-
I thought I.
Quiet, I heard.
Okay, great. So we will have that resolution ready for the next meeting and you'll get that beforehand to review it. And unless there's anything else, I think that's it for now, for tonight. So yeah, so at our next meeting, we will vote on that resolution and then you'll get your approval.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for coming out.
So that'll be on the 6th.
Yes, I think, yeah. Good
Thanks.
night.
You
And so the last thing I wanted to discuss before we adjourned was just that public comment next meeting for the New Paltz Apartments. This will be our third public comment. And I mean, I believe that most people who wanted a chance to speak will have done so by the 6th. So I would recommend us closing it after that meeting. Fortunately, I'm not going to be able to be here at that meeting. But just wanted to put that out there now and yeah, unless there is some new development that comes up between now and then, that would be my recommendation.
Emily, for the record and for the benefit of the public, can you explain so this would be closing the public hearing on the DEIS that was presented at this time. At what point would be the next point the public would have another opportunity to contribute formally?
So I don't expect we'll have another comment on the seeker review, but there will be public comment at all the other stages along the way. The village and town boards will need to consider the annexation. There will be public comment associated with that. And of course, none of those things can happen until we finish the seeker review. So wrapping the seeker review up is important so that those other decisions can be considered and made. And then, if we get to the point of a site plan, then it'll come back to the planning board for a site plan review and we'll have another public comment at that time on the details of the project.
So closing this public hearing formally on the DEIS does not by any means close the public's opportunity to contribute their issues with the plan over the course of the next several stages.
And the other thing I'd mention is that we still accept written comments 10 days, up to 10 days after we close the hearing at the meeting. So yeah, I think that's all for tonight. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
You get this one.
So moved.
Second.